Good morning, Professor Grandin. How are you?
I am doing just fine.
I wanted to thank you for contributing to our conference. This event is in honor of my books.
Really good to be here.
Thank you. This event is in honor of my book, Sfat Em, which is the translation into Hebrew of Autism Mom New Ways of Thinking. It's the main idea of the book is that in order to help our child to really be there for him or her, we need to first help ourselves get over fear and guilt and become centered and connected so we can focus on helping them. And indeed, I personally have changed my career. I was an attorney working in Manhattan, and after Dan was diagnosed, I decided to change paths and learn everything I can about autism so I can help him. And my son Dan is 18 now. He's typing on tablet, and he will also be giving a speech on his tablet in the conference, in the same conference that we are recording towards. And Dan typed recently that his success is thanks to my believing in him and our mutual hard work. Which brings me to the first question I wanted to ask you, which is, how did it feel to you as a child having a mother who pushed you?
Well, I'm really glad she did. But what mother always did, especially when I was little, was broaden my fixations. Like when I was 8 years old in primary school, I would just draw the same horse head over and over again. And she wanted me to draw the entire horse. She'd take that fixation and broaden it. You know, the mistake that's made is to try to stamp out the fixation. A better approach is to broaden. So if the child's interested in cars, let's read about the history of the automobile. Let's learn the science of how cars work. If it's a very young child, let's do a turn-taking game with a toy car. In other words, tap into that interest in cars, but you broaden it. So then but you're tapping into that motivation.
And when you were first diagnosed, what did the experts say about your prospect? And how different was it from what actually happened?
Well, I was very severely nonverbal, all the typical autistic behaviors. I'm the kind of kid that normally in the 50s, I was born in 1947. So I would have been taken into the doctor at age, around age 2. And I was the type of kid that normally they would put in an institution. But fortunately, my mother went to a neurologist named Bronson Brothers, who checked me for epilepsy, no epilepsy, and he checked me to make sure I wasn't deaf. That's really important. And then he referred me to a little school that 2 teachers taught out of the basement of their home, 2 speech therapists. And I got lots of one-on-one speech therapy. They would slow down when they talked to me. They had a lot of emphasis on turn taking. The other thing you have to do with these little kids is give them time to respond. They're like a phone that's really slow with 1 bar of service. You have to give it time to respond. And I was very lucky to get into that program by age 2.5. And they were really good teachers. They were just as good as teachers we have today. They just knew how to work with little kids that did not talk. So fortunately, I went into that program. And then by age 5, I went into a normal kindergarten and the normal small, primary school.
So did they first say things like she would never talk, she would never be independent? Is that what your mother heard from the experts?
Fortunately, she didn't. Fortunately, she didn't take me to a psychologist. She took me to a neurologist. And a neurologist has sort of a different orientation. But today, I'm hearing way too much where doctors are telling their parents their kid will never, ever go anywhere. Or the child's got speech delay and they're saying, well, he'll just grow out of it. No, he needs to get into therapy like right away if there's speech delay. The other thing is a problem in autism is they keep changing the guidelines. The original autism diagnosis, you had to have speech delay. obvious speech delay would be called autistic. And then in the early 90s, they brought in Asperger's, which is basically socially awkward with no speech delay. And then in 2013, they merged it all together, which has been a big mess. So now you have a spectrum that's going from Elon Musk, and Elon Musk is on the autism spectrum, to somebody who can't dress themselves. So you have all this range of severities. But when the kids are real small at age 3, I look really severe at age 3. And you just don't know how they're going to kind of come out at that point. You just got to work on them really hard and do lots of intensive one-to-one therapy with an effective teacher. We've got a lot of arguments going on now about different types of therapy. What I have found is you got to have the right teacher, and the right teacher gets progress. And I'm talking 3-year-olds here. And progress is going to be more speech, better turn taking, learning how to wait and take turns at games, and skills like eating with utensils. Those are 3 things that would be progress. Another thing is you should be getting this progress, and the child should like going to therapy. If the child hates therapy, then he's probably, or she is probably being driven into sensory overload, and that's not acceptable. A good teacher knows just how much to push to get that progress without forcing a child into sensory overload.
So the signs that you would give parents to know whether a child is progressing is to measure those things you mentioned, the turn taking, the speech,
turn taking,
and being happy to go there, not object going to therapy.
Well, they should like going to therapy, and you should be getting progress. And the other little tip is, even now I have a slow processing speed. So if I'm a computer, I've got a old-fashioned Intel 286 chip, but I've got a couple of warehouses full of servers for memory. That's what the cloud is. The cloud. Warehouses full of servers of computers.
Which
but
also
that slow processor, when you're teaching these kids to talk and you ask them to use their words, give them time to respond. It might be 10 or 15 seconds. That's a long time. You've got to give them time to respond. It's just like if I want this computer to wake up and I click on it 20 times, it just freezes. I have to click on it once and let it wake up. It's sort of like that.
I see. And Professor Grandin, what from what you remember, and actually from later ages as well, what was it that your mom did good, and what did your mom do that you would change or that you didn't like?
Well, she did a lot of things really right. Being brought up in the 50s, kids had to learn table manners. Social skills were taught in a much more structured way. That was good. And she always encouraged my creative abilities in art. That was always, always encouraged. She did a lot of things right, especially when I was little.
Was there something that you didn't like that she did, like pushed you too hard or anything of that sort?
She had a really good sense of just how hard to push me. What I'm seeing right now is too many parents where they're babying the kid. I'm seeing 16-year-old kids that are fully verbal who have never gone shopping by themselves. I was shopping for little toys and comics when I was 8 and 9 years old. And the way I learned money was I got 50 cents a week, which is now about $5 US, controlling for inflation. And there were certain items that were allowance items, like candy bars, comics, little toy airplanes. These were considered allowance items. And I learned if I wanted that 69-cent airplane, I had to save for 2 weeks. And I'm realizing how important it was for me to learn that. And table manners were taught. Like if I stuck my finger in my drink, Mother would say, use the spoon. They would give the instruction. They wouldn't say no. They'd give the instruction. And I'm finding many granddads and grandmothers are coming up to me, and they find out they're autistic when the kids get diagnosed. But that granddaddy had a paper route. We're going to have to make substitute paper routes, like volunteer jobs at the synagogue, where they're doing a task on a schedule where somebody outside the home is the boss. That needs to start around 11.
So responsibility and also communication with someone outside of the family.
Well, I'm having to do something like walk the neighbor's dog every day at 7 o'clock in the morning. It's a job.
Right.
And for the next, okay, it's important to walk your own dog, but it's also important that they be doing a job for somebody who's not in the family. It's
Right.
Mrs. Jones's dog, and it has to be walked every day at 7 o'clock.
And I'm going back to your mom again. After the diagnosis, when they told her all of those things that did not seem very hopeful, how did she find the courage to believe in you?
Well, fortunately, I'm just old enough to avoid the worst Bettelheim stuff, where moms were blamed. That started 10 years later. And by that time, it was pretty obvious that, I was going to do things. She was not bombarded with that. You see,
So
I was 74 years old. And so all that horrible negativity, she was not blasted with that.
So you're saying she didn't have that piece of feeling guilty for supposedly causing it, and therefore she had the courage, the energy to help.
Well, that probably helped that she wasn't being told by doctors that she caused it. You see, that Bettelheim stuff in the book, The Empty Fortress, that came out 10 years later or something.
Right.
And so the doctor that, when I was real little, that she was working with was a neurologist, which I think was good.
Amazing. And what message would you have for parents whose child was just diagnosed?
I think it depends upon the age. Obviously, if you have speech delay, the kid's going to be diagnosed really young. And you got to work on it. You don't know how they're going to kind of come out. You just don't know. Now, one thing that improves prognosis is not having any epileptic activity in the brain. That tends to improve prognosis. And then you have the kid that's diagnosed at 8 or 9 years old who has no friends. And what you got to do is get friends who shared interests. The worst part of my life was the teenage years. Absolutely worst part of my life. I got kicked out of a regular school at age 14 because I threw a book at a girl who called me a retard. I ended up going to a special boarding school. They put me to work running a horse barn. I didn't do much studying, but a lot of stall cleaning. One of the things I learned is I learned how to work. But I got bullied there too. But I had friends when we went riding together. I had friends in Model Rocket Club. It's also really important to expose children to activities like model rockets. I got interested in them because I was exposed. Also, I was exposed to horses, so I got interested. A lot of kids are not getting exposed to enough stuff to find out what they might be interested in. But in riding and getting ready for shows and Model Rocket Club, those were activities where I had friends who shared interests.
I think that a lot of parents, we get confused a little bit when we get the diagnosis, because the feeling is that the experts, when they hand you that, they kind of give you the feeling that they're just never going to be normal. Who knows whether they're going to be learning anything, whether they're going to ever be speaking. And so parents lose hope. And that's why a lot of times they don't try to expose, they don't try to teach, because it's just hard. Somebody just told you there's no hope for your kid. So what would you say to parents like that?
Well, this is the reason why Deborah Moore and I came out with this book, Navigating Autism. And the very first thing in this book is the problem of what Deborah Moore calls label blocking.
Right.
They do not see the whole child.
Right.
And this is especially bad when it's, okay, the kid has no friends, diagnosed at age 9. Well, I worked with many, many people in skilled trades on building big beef plants that were either autistic, dyslexic, or ADHD. These people own large metal equipment that build equipment out of metal. Own. big companies. Yeah, they were really weird, but they were really good at building their equipment. This brings up another thing. This is why taking skilled trades out of the schools is the worst thing we ever did.
Right.
We don't have people to fix factories. Yeah, I'm working on another book on visual thinking. Right now, we want to build a poultry processing plant. We got to bring it over here in 100 shipping containers. Well, the thing is that these kids that are different are the ones that do a lot of really clever engineering stuff. But you got a fully verbal kid and just getting bullied, and don't get locked into the label. I mean, just don't.
So,
but the problem with the autism label is you're going, when the kids get older, you're going from Elon Musk, who I can mention by name because he's been public about it. I have always thought he was autistic. You might want to read the book about Elon Musk. It's called Elon Musk, and read about the first third of that book. The rest of the stuff about industry you don't need to read, but read the first third of that book. And I always thought he was autistic. Einstein probably had autism.
Now So your message to parents would be: look beyond the label. Look at the child.
You gotta look beyond the label.
Okay.
Don't get locked into the label.
Right.
And the main purpose of this book is to change the attitude of the parent.
Right.
And then once I've changed the attitude, if you're working with little kids, this is my how-to book.
Right.
There's a whole lot of little short articles just on how to work with kids, the way I see it.
Right.
But the purpose of the navigating autism is to change the attitude. And you have different degrees of autism, and you've got to look at what they can do. Okay, your son is typing independently, and that's really good. And I emphasize to parents books written by people that type independently.
Yeah, I work personally with Soma Mukapadieh, and I've brought her to Israel. And we're working on having people understand Tito's brain and his abilities so they can understand that other children who have the same motor issues like him can also be able to penetrate their motor issues and have them communicate.
Well, and I talk about Tito in my regular autism talks. I always mention Tito's book. It's available on Amazon as an ebook. Unfortunately, the print copy, I think, is out of print, but the ebook is still available. And I recommend that to people. And then you've got the Japanese book, The Reason I Jump, and then the sequel. I like the sequel better because and he gives a lot more insight in terms of being valuable for parents. And that book is available in all formats. But I think it's important if a child remains nonverbal. I think it's extremely important for parents and teachers and therapists to read those books written by individuals who are typing independently that are nonverbal. I think that's really important. I really like what Stephen Hawking has to say about disability. Concentrate on those things. Your disability does not prevent you from doing well. He could do math in his head really well, not much else. But that's what Stephen Hawking told the New York Times shortly before he died. Concentrate on those things. Your disability does not prevent you from doing well.
Sounds like great advice for that.
I think that's really, really good advice.
In my book, Autism Mom and now Sfat Em, in Hebrew, I tell parents to look deep and become a scientist of their own child, to study them in order to figure out what they're good at, and then find their ways to fulfill their potential. Is that something that you would agree is important?
Absolutely. I totally agree with that. Absolutely agree with what you're saying. That's the same approach that I would have.
Amazing. Professor Grandin, thank you so much for contributing to our conference. I really appreciate it. Every time I speak to you, I learn something new, and it helps me understand Dan better. And I hope more parents and therapists and teachers will be using your wise words to understand their own students and children. And I really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Well, it was really, really good to be here, and thank you so much for having me.